Hello there, algebras, and welcome to Chapter 2, Lesson 7 notes. So we are going to create histograms now. So let's get into this. After the data have been organized, histogram is a great visual. So here we go. Now, data is organized for a histogram into something called a frequency table. So you can see we've got test scores here, and we've got our frequency of who's falling into those test scores. So how many data values in each of these areas, right? So 6 people got between a 91 and a 100. 8 people got between an 81 and a 90. 8 people got between a 71 and an 80. 4 people got between a 61 and a 70. I want you to notice that these intervals, we're going to call them, these intervals all have the same number of potentials in them. 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. 10 potential scores in this interval. Then you look at the next interval, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. 10 potential data values, 10 potential test scores in that interval. Intervals are always having to have the same number of potentials. How many actually fall? Oh, that's my study hall coming. How many actually fall in this is dependent on how many people got a score there. So you don't know what these 6 scores are. I just know that they're either a 91, a 92, a 93, a 94, a 95, a 96, a 97, a 98, a 99, or a 100. So unfortunately, I don't know the actual values, but I do know how many fit in that interval. Okay. That's where I'm going to pause it for the moment so that my study hall can come in. But I shall be back, kiddos, and I'll keep going. All right. Okay, algebras, we are back. And let's take a peek at where we left off. So we were talking about how each of the intervals has to be the same amount of potential data values in there. Now, the frequency is the number of data values that do fit. So like I had said, we'll do this column now. 8 people, 8 scores were an 81 or an 82 or an 83 or an 84, all the way up to a 90. Okay. Now, a couple things when creating a histogram. We label the horizontal axis intervals. We label the vertical axis frequencies. So that means the x-axis is always going to be your intervals, and the y-axis is always going to be your frequencies. Okay, and that's always the case, so it always happens that way. If my lowest interval does not start at 0, then I need to use something called a break. And that just means that since my graph doesn't start at 0, I can't start at 0, so I put this little guy here, or you can do this little guy. Either of those are breaks, right? So I call this one the Harry Potter scar, and I just call this one the dashes. And you can use either of those, and I'll interchange when I'm doing mine so you can see both. Now, because each of the intervals is technically the same width, because it's allowing the same number of things in it, that means that each bar representing that intervals has to be the same width. So if you choose to have your bars, two bars wide, then all of them need to be 2 bars wide. If you choose to have them 1 wide, then all of them need to be 1 wide. But whatever you choose for that, it has to continue throughout. Okay, your intervals always go from smallest to largest, which means we're going to go starting here, because that's our smallest interval, all the way up to here. So this one's a little backwards from normal. And then there should not be spaces between the bars. So the bars touch. And the reason for that is it goes directly from 41 to 50, then starts 51 to 60. There is no gap between the intervals, so there's going to be no gap between the bars that represent them on the graph. Now that I've gone through all that, let's actually get this stuff on the graph. Okay, so my lowest interval is 41 to 50, which means it doesn't start at 0, but this starts at 0 right here. This is 0 for frequency and interval. So as a result, I need to put a break, and I'm going to use the Harry Potter scar right here because, mischief managed. Now I need each of my intervals throughout. So I'm going to go by twos, right? So I'm going to make them wide enough here that that's how wide my bar will be. And this first interval, it's always the smallest, is 41 to 50. So now because I chose to go by twos here as far as fit, the next interval touches and also goes to wide. And then the next interval touches, also goes to wide. Then the next interval touches, also goes to wide. And now again, we have to keep that going. The whole way. Okay. Now frequencies is the same deal. So let me just look at what my max frequency is and see how many hash marks I have heading up. These are intervals. Always label. Now let's count. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 20 lines going up. My largest frequency is 8. So actually, if I count every other as 1, 2, 3, 4, so this is my scale. If I do that for every other, I have plenty of room to fit all of my frequencies on this graph. And of course, we label that frequencies, so I kind of put this off to the side. And frequencies are, of course, the number of test scores that fall in each of the intervals that we've been given. And now I'll use my straight edge to create those. So how many are in the 41 to 50 interval? 3. Okay. Goes up here. So I use my straight edge to create my bars. And I know I said in the last video that the straight edge would be necessary. Anytime you're drawing any straight lines of any kind, you need to use a straight edge. So there's my first bar. Now, the next interval has a frequency of 0. So I have the bar created already. It's right there. Okay, that bar isn't going to go up any further. It has a frequency of 0. Nobody got between a 50 and a 60 on 51 and a 60 on this test. Now the next one is 4. So let's find where 4 is right here. Okay. Now I'm using this straight edge to draw my lines. I'll ding you if you don't use a straight edge. Make sure you're doing that. Okay, that's 4. Next interval has 8. So all the way up here. And the interval after that has 8. So I'm kind of marking all the way. Now, of course, part of this line is already done. But now I've got this one. And then this one. So because they were the same height, I can now just draw straight across here. That was kind of lucky. Okay. So I'm marking on my chart that I've got them done. And then my last one is up to 6. So right here. That line is kind of, the left line is already drawn because of the previous interval. Now, connect, just like that. That's my histogram of test scores, right? And the last thing I do is I title this histogram of test scores. Okay. My intervals didn't start at 0, so I have a break. My intervals are all the same width. Okay, my bars are touching. This is technically touching because there's just 0 data values in this interval. Okay, that's still touching. My frequencies are on a scale that fit all of my frequencies for my data. I've labeled, I've titled. Each interval is labeled. That's how, oh, my bars were created with straight edges. That's how I create a histogram. Okay. That's how you create a histogram. I want you to pause the video and tally up which values go in which intervals, and then count that frequency. A tally, by the way, is, oh, 3. There's a tally. And it goes in here. This is a tally. Okay? That's a tally. I want you to tally those up, label their frequencies, and come back to create the histogram with me. All right? Pause. You pause. Do it. Okay, let's see what you got. I stopped crossing them out, but that's how we tally. Remember, with a tally, you do 4 marks, and then the 5th one is the diagonal, so you can count by 5s pretty easily to get your frequency marked up. So if you have all the data present in front of you, that's when you would do the tally and the frequency count. And so just make sure your frequency count matches my frequency count there. Okay? Creating the histogram. All right. So let's look back at our intervals, and they start at 1. So guess what I need to use? A break. I can't start at 0 because they don't start at 0. So I'm going to use the, I don't know, hash mark break, right? And then here, let's get each of my intervals in. I'll go 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10, and then 11 to 15. Then we got 16 to 20. Again, these are touching because they go straight from one interval to the next. And there we go. These are intervals, so we label. Intervals are always the x-axis. All right, this was 0. That's why we had to have the break, because our first interval did not start at 0. So of course, this will be frequencies. That also starts at 0. We need to go all the way up to 13 frequency-wise. Okay, and because we have to go all the way up to 13 frequency-wise, and I know this is the same graph, I know I can count up to 20. This time I'm going by ones, right? So 1, 2, 3, and keep going. And then after we get a good amount labeled for our scale, we'll label the side frequencies. So all the way up to 20, and so this is how many people of each of those age groups were attending whatever event this was. All right, straight edge and begin. We need to be up to 7, so here we are. Notice I had my break, so I knew where to start. Okay, and the next one is all the way up to 13. Holy spagoli. There we go. So I have that helping me. Notice I kind of put marks there and then use that to help me when I'm using my straight edge. I like to use kind of a see-through straight edge. It really helps. Oh, this next interval is 0. And then we're up to 2. And then up to 3. And then we're done. Oops, my bad. There we go. Okay, here we go. Oops, I used. Okay. All lines that are straight are drawn using a straight edge, a ruler of some kind. And then there was nothing in this group. Okay, that's cool. And then we title. So histogram of ages at an event. That was the most information I had, so that's as detailed as I can get. This is a histogram of ages at an event. Would I describe this graph as skewed or symmetrical? This is skewed right. And why is that? Because I have a tail of data to the right-hand side, but most of my data is off to the left. So that's why we call that skewed right, because it looks like this. It's high, goes low to the right. So skewed right. That's it. That's how we make a histogram. Nothing on the graphing calculator for these ones. All right. So go right ahead and get going on your chapter 2, lesson 7 homework, and let me know if you need anything. All right, guys, that was the last lesson of chapter 2. So now we're just going to do an extra data review, and then our exam review, and then our exam. That's that. Let me know if you need something, and I will be seeing you. Bye, Algebras.